history of Chicago in the Roaring '20s. It's a history written with the rapid fire of Tommy guns, held by gangsters like Dion O'Banion, Jaime Weiss, Frank Nitti, and of course the ruthless and cunning Scarface Al Capone. We'll show you how Capone used murder to carve out a multi-million-dollar criminal empire, an empire based on illegal booze, prostitution, and gambling. We'll explore the private rooms, the secret passages, the hidden stairways of his once luxurious hotel headquarters. We'll descend 40 feet beneath the streets of Chicago into a vast and little-known tunnel system, one that may have been used by Scarface Al Capone and his men. Here in Chicago, in Miami, in Los Angeles, and on San Francisco's Alcatraz Island, we'll talk to people who knew Al Capone personally.
Capone was an evil man.
He seemed just like a big roly-poly teddy bear to me.
He was just like any other hoodlum. He was lovable. He was sweet.
Who do you think murdered your husband?
Al Capone did.
Just a few miles west of downtown Chicago and the Lexington Hotel lies Cicero. In 1923, the year the Chicago Crime Commission named Al Capone public enemy #1, Cicero was a quiet middle-class suburb, but that didn't last for long. 1923 was also the year Chicago got a new mayor. Big Bill Thompson was finally replaced by a law and order reformer, a man named William Deaver. Deaver appointed as chief of police an incorruptible lawman, Morgan Collins by name. When Capone offered him $100,000 a month not to interfere with his Chicago activities, Collins answered by raiding Capone's speakeasies, brothels, gambling dens, and breweries, and by arresting scores of his men. Confronted for the first time by an untouchable mayor and an incorruptible police chief, Capone quickly realized that he needed a safe haven. He chose nearby Cicero. On that lot once stood the Hawthorne Inn. It was Capone's Cicero headquarters, complete with armor-plated walls and bulletproof steel shutters. From here, Capone ran his Chicago operations. He also converted Cicero from a once peaceful community into a center of vice and violence. It wasn't long before Cicero could boast 150 gambling establishments, most of them featuring slot machines and roulette. There were also 125 saloons and speakeasies, and a string of brothels stretching from one end of town to the other. The cost, in case you're interested, was $2 for every 5 minutes or fraction thereof. It may not sound like a lot of money, but it was enough to earn Capone an estimated $10 million a year. Cicero's mayor, a corrupt mobster puppet named Joseph Z. Klenhoff, was re-elected to office in 1924 only because a 200-man army of Capone's thugs and torpedoes intimidated, terrorized, and physically assaulted any Cicero citizen who wouldn't cast his ballot for Klenhoff. Well, on this site back in the 1920s stood one of the mob's favorite suppliers. William Schoenfeld's flower shop was partly owned by a deceptively good-natured Irishman named Dion O'Banion. Deanie to his friends, he was apparently one of his own best customers. You see, O'Banion, the flower shop owner, was also O'Banion, the killer. After a youth spent in this neighborhood perfecting such skills as hijacking, safe-cracking, armed robbery, and finally contract murder, O'Banion and his gang had become one of Al Capone's most deadly rivals. He and his boys controlled most of Chicago's north side, and they actually posed a threat to Al Capone's master plan of controlling Chicago's entire underworld. On November 10th, 1924, Dion O'Banion was in his flower shop, doing next to murder what he loved doing best. He was arranging a lovely bouquet of roses to adorn the casket of a recently murdered mob chieftain. He never got to the ribbons. Just as he was putting the finishing touches on that bouquet of roses, Deanie O'Banion was blown away by 3 of Al Capone's torpedoes. For 3 days, O'Banion's body lay at the Suburb funeral home. Then on the 4th, it was buried in the grandest gangland funeral Chicago had ever seen. O'Banion's funeral cortege featured 26 cars. Naturally, they were adorned with tons of flowers. There were 10,000 mourners, including some of Chicago's most important politicians and high-ranking police officials. The bizarre spectacle marked the beginning of Capone's violent struggle to take control of this city. That struggle was aided by Chicago's political machine. Mayor William E. Deaver, whose tough anti-mob tactics had forced Capone to take refuge in Cicero, was voted out of office. The corrupt administration of Mayor Big Bill Thompson was now back in power, and it wasn't long before Al Capone was welcome back in Chicago. Capone and Torrio began aggressively to expand their criminal empire, but they faced violent opposition. With Dion O'Banion dead, a fiery young Pole named Jaime Weiss had taken over control of the North Side Irish gang. And he wanted territory and power as badly as Capone and Torrio did. He also wanted revenge. Shortly after O'Banion was buried, Al Capone's car was sprayed with bullets and his chauffeur wounded. Capone ordered a bulletproof Cadillac limousine, only to have his new chauffeur kidnapped, tortured, and ultimately killed. On January 23rd, 1925, Johnny Torrio and his wife were coming home from an afternoon shopping when Jaime Weiss and the boys struck again. Mrs. Torrio had already gone into their apartment right here. Johnny Torrio was hanging out on the sidewalk when three men approached from a Cadillac limousine parked on the corner. They fired a salvo of bullets at Johnny Torrio, hitting him 3 times. Once in the jaw, once in the chest, another time in the groin. Torrio fell right about here. At that point, one of the hitmen ran up to him with his pistol drawn to administer the coup de grace. But as he pressed the pistol to Torrio's head, he clicked it. The weapon was empty. Miraculously, Torrio would survive, but he found it prudent at that point to retire. But before he left, he signed over his share of the brothels, the gambling establishments, and the speakeasies to Al Capone. Scarface now controlled a criminal empire worth tens of millions of dollars. He was just 26 years old.